This is an enormous body of work assessing all the science that's related to the impacts of climate change on human systems, natural systems, and how society and nature can adapt to climate change. And it looks at the impacts that have already happened and the future possible impacts, and it also looks at this from the opportunities for adjusting. It's not just a bad news story. It looks at it from if you like a risk management perspective. How can we deal with this problem? It's an enormous body of work looking at it globally, but also there's a wealth of regional detail. We don't just look at it as a global picture, but we zoom in on the different areas of the world. So we've in fact got two volumes, one looking at the overall issues, the global issues, and one looking region by region at how climate change is affecting different parts of the world.
For the first time, there is a clear regional chapters with analysis inside the individual regions and sub-regions, because we know that already climate change is occurring at the local scale in many territories. So it has a local effect, as well as responses has to be started to find at the local level. The current climate impacts are documented. This analysis of literature confirm many sectors and specific regions are affected by climate impacts.
Now, signals of impact of climate change are clearly detectable, even though considering the potential confounding factors like land uses, overexploitation of resources. First of all, the reaction of ecosystems. Animal species, vegetal species are changing, are moving, so there is a redistribution of ecosystems. But what is interesting is that there are also some social and economic impacts that are already detectable. The impact with an economic relevance. For instance, wheat yields are declining in some areas of Asia and also of Europe. Also, today there are some phenomena of water scarcity, which are clearly induced not by an over-exploitation or bad exploitation of water resources, but because of water scarcity induced by climate change. So when we are talking about future impact, we should briefly mention the fact that the IPCC produced a new scenario building exercise, which is based on these RCPs, representative concentration pathways, which basically define different temperature increases and CO2 concentration. Let's have a look at the two extremes of these RCPs. We have the 2.6, which is basically consistent with a situation in which we are more or less able to stabilize temperature increase at or slightly below the 2 degrees Celsius within the century, and the 8.5, which is the extreme in the other sense, is the more pessimistic, if we would like to say it this way, assuming that by the end of the century temperature could increase between 4 and 6 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial level. What is interesting to notice first is that until 2040, basically the two temperature profile coincide. So this is called the period of committed climate change. So whatever we are going to do today, more or less we are going to experience that temperature increase, because the climate system has some inertias which are very, very hard and very difficult to revert. But this is also the period in which we need to act immediately to decide in which of the two branches we would like to place ourselves. The report identified the so-called reason for concerns. Each of these is important because it involves many different aspects of human welfare. These are overarching reasons for concerns. A first large area for concern is what is going to happen to ecosystems. And the point is that if we are going to lose ecosystem, we are going to lose biodiversity, we don't really know what could happen, because this could have impacts on the food chain, on health. Another one is the one related to change in frequency and intensity of extreme events. This can be extreme floods, extreme droughts, extreme precipitation. All these factors are very concerning because they influence negatively health, energy provision, our infrastructure. The third area for concern, which is something that this report emphasizes, perhaps more respect to the past, is the possibility of trespassing some thresholds, the issue of tipping points. And for temperature increases close to 40 degrees Celsius above industrial level, this risk of some abrupt change in our living condition, like for instance dramatic ice sheet melting or some reverting of some global circulation phenomena, is something that we have to take into account. And in this case, this would change completely the way in which we live and we produce.
The concerns are so scaled up from hotspots, let's say, spots where we do see today problems, to the possibility that these, let's say, leopard skins of events becomes more continuous, becomes a regional change or even a planetary global change. That's at the scale where we are now pointing with scenarios of increasing warming.
And another important reason for concern is the adverse distributional effect that climate change impact can have, in the sense that weaker groups, poorer people, poorer countries are more adversely affected, and they are less able to adapt. They are more vulnerable, and this means that climate change impacts increase inequality. And there is the likelihood that this increase in inequality is very, very large, especially in the second half of the century, and could be unsustainable.
There will be, in any case, climate change, even if we do everything we can, so there will be some kind of residual climate change. So in any case, the human society has to adapt.
I think the main message of this report is adaptation is needed now. So despite any global policy on mitigation or reduction emission of greenhouse gases, we need to adapt because impacts are going on and they will increase in some area. And they will hit industrialized country and developing country. And so we need to increase the resilience of this country in the different sector to the future impacts of climate change. So adaptation should be seen as a part of our effort to go to a sustainable development of our society.